Jack Whitmore had never liked the sound of tires crunching gravel. It was a sharp, violating sound, the kind that didn't belong on a ranch this old, this far off from the paved world. But that morning, it wasn't just the sound that got under, and his skin. It was the SUV behind it, gleaming black, city slick, and crawling up his long private drive like it had a right to be there. He set his coffee mug down on the porch railing and squinted against the rising sun. He didn't recognize the vehicle, but he knew immediately. Whoever it was, they weren't lost. The SUV came to a slow stop just outside the wrought iron gate. Jack watched as a woman stepped out, dressed in a sharp grey pantsuit and heeled boots that didn't belong anywhere near dirt. She held a sleek leather folder, and her lips were painted in a shade too bold for a ranch visit. She didn't wave, didn't smile. She just walked up to the gate like she owned the place. Jack descended the porch steps slowly, not saying a word until they were face to face. Him on one side of the gate, her on the other. A barbed silence hung between them. "You Jack Whitmore?" she asked, eyes scanning him like he was the help. He nodded. "Who's asking?" The woman slipped a paper from the folder, held it up. "My name is Clarissa Hensley. This ranch was stolen from my family. I have the deed. This land is legally mine." Jack blinked, then chuckled. It wasn't a polite laugh. It was the kind of laugh that said, "You've got to be kidding me. I've lived on this ranch for 25 years, Jack said, folding his arms. "My great-grandfather built that barn himself in 1895. You think you can just roll in here with a paper and claim it's yours?" "I don't think," she said coldly. "I know." She extended the document through the gate. "It's filed with the county. I suggest you get your affairs in order." Jack didn't take the paper. He glanced at the top corner. It did look official. County seal, notarized signature, a case number, his name, his address. But it didn't make sense. The Whitmores had never sold, traded, or mortgaged an inch of Hollow Creek Ranch. It had passed, down clean, generation to generation. And no one, not in all these years, had ever disputed that. Clarissa's expression didn't waver. "We can do this the easy way, Mr. Whitmore. Or I can have a sheriff out here next week with a court order. You won't like that option." He leaned in slightly, voice low and steady. "Lady, I was born 3 miles from here. I raised cattle on this land, built that fence with my own hands. You think some printout gives you the right to walk in here and tell me I don't belong?" She didn't flinch. "Then I guess we'll see you in court." Without another word, she turned and walked back to her SUV. Gravel spat behind her tires as she drove away, leaving Jack standing there in the dust, staring at a copy of his own home on a stranger's piece of paper. He didn't know it then, but Clarissa Hensley wasn't just threatening to take his land. She was about to rip open a century-old secret that would turn everything he thought he knew upside down. And she wasn't bluffing. Jack stared at the empty road long after the SUV disappeared over the ridge, the morning silence settling back around him. But it wasn't peaceful anymore. It was loaded, tense. That woman's voice echoed in his head, sharp and calm like a scalpel. "This ranch was stolen from my family." He walked back to the porch, coffee cold, and sat down with a creak in the old rocking chair. The folder she'd waved at him. It had his address, his name, which meant she'd done her research. And this wasn't some crackpot con job. It was personal. He reached for his phone and dialed the county clerk's office. After some hold musics and a bored receptionist, he got through to a records officer who confirmed the worst. Yes, a property dispute had been filed that morning. Yes, Clarissa Hensley was listed as the complainant. And yes, The attached documentation included a historical deed, dated 1894. Jack nearly dropped the phone. That was the year before the ranch was built, before Samuel Whitmore, his great-grandfather, had sunk the first post in the ground. Something was wrong. He hung up, grabbed his keys, and headed for the one place that might have answers: the attic. The ranch house hadn't changed much since Samuel's day. The stairs creaked with familiar rhythm as Jack climbed to the third floor and pulled down the old ceiling hatch. Dust spiraled in the air as he hauled up a wooden trunk and pried it open. Inside were crumbling ledgers, yellowed photographs, and wrapped bundles of letters tied with brittle twine. He rifled through until he found a small oilskin pouch. Inside, wrapped in cloth, was Samuel's journal. The entries were short, utilitarian, weather, crop notes, birth of a calf. But one name jumped out at him: Hensley. April 3rd, 1895. Talked with Thomas Hensley again. Refuses to accept the trade. Claims title is still his. Will not let this go quietly. Jack stared at the page, heart pounding. There was a Hensley connection, and it wasn't friendly. He flipped forward. April 9th, 1895. Hensley came by drunk. Threatened to burn the barn. Claims my father falsified something years back. Says he's taking it back if the courts won't. The entries stopped for a few days. Then, April 15th, 1895. Hensley hasn't been seen in days. Sheriff says he left town. Doesn't feel right. Jack sat back, stunned. The last entry in the journal was dated 2 days later and never mentioned the name again. Whatever happened between Samuel and Thomas Hensley, it hadn't ended with a handshake. He looked back at the date Clarissa had filed her claim. The deed she presented, 1894. Could it be that deed? Had it never been properly voided? He rubbed a hand over his face. God Almighty, what did you do? Samuel. Then, as if summoned by the memory, the silence outside broke again. A car door slamming. Jack stood up, heart already beating faster. Out the window, Clarissa was back. But this time, she wasn't alone. A man in a suit stood beside her, holding a clipboard. They didn't approach the house. They walked the perimeter, pointing and discussing something. Jack stepped out onto the porch and called out, "Hey!" Clarissa glanced up, sunglasses reflecting the sun. She didn't say a word. But the man beside her smirked, raised the clipboard in a half wave, and kept walking. Jack didn't know what game they were playing, but now he was sure of one thing. This wasn't just a legal dispute. It was a war over history, and someone a long time ago had left unfinished business buried deep in the ground. For the next 2 days, Jack didn't sleep right. He'd wake to strange sounds. Twigs snapping outside the window, the faint scrape of gravel beneath cautious footsteps. Once, near midnight, the porch boards creaked like someone had stepped onto them. But every time he grabbed his flashlight and rushed outside, there was nothing but wind and stars and the wide-open dark. But on the third night, he caught her. It was just past 3 a.m. when the cows began to stir, snorting, shuffling, nervous. Jack was already half awake, boots by the bed, shotgun leaning by the door. He slipped outside in silence, keeping low beneath the shadows of the porch. The moon was high, casting just enough light for him to see. There she was, Clarissa, standing by the barn, alone. Her hair was pulled back tightly, and she was whispering something too quiet to catch, but her voice trembled like she was chanting. Her fingers brushed along the wooden siding like she was feeling for a lock or a hollow panel. Jack stepped out of the shadows. Lose something. She froze. For one surreal moment, they stared at each other under the moonlight. Then she smiled. Not startled, not apologetic. That same cold, knowing smile. I was just looking, she said calmly. This barn used to belong to my great-grandfather. I was hoping to feel a connection. Jack leveled his flashlight at her. Trespassing's a funny way to honor family. You really don't know, do you? She said, eyes glinting. What this land's hiding? He stepped forward. Try me. But she only laughed softly and turned away, walking back into the darkness like she'd never been there. The next morning, Jack inspected the barn. He found it after 20 minutes. A small gap behind the feed bins, barely noticeable. A single board loosened, pried away just enough to see behind it. Wedged inside was something wrapped in oilcloth. He tugged it free and unwrapped it slowly. It was a photograph, black and white, faded and cracked. 4 men stood in front of the barn, Samuel Whitmore among them, looking younger than Jack had ever imagined. Beside him stood another man, one Jack didn't recognize, until he read the scribbled name on the back, Thomas Hensley, 1894. They were shaking hands, but neither looked happy about it. Stuffed behind the photo was a folded letter, torn at the edges. Jack opened it carefully. I do this under duress. He's cornered me legally, and I cannot fight his backing, but the truth will surface. This land was never his to claim. No signature, but the handwriting matched the journal. Clarissa hadn't lied, at least not entirely. Some kind of deal had gone down. A forced sale. A blackmail? Jack didn't know, but what mattered was this. Her family believed Samuel Whitmore had stolen the ranch, and now, over a century later, Clarissa had come to take it back. Jack installed cameras that night, 4 of them, motion-activated, infrared, covering every angle of the property, and it didn't take long to catch her again. 12 a.m. She was back at the barn, standing completely still, whispering the same thing over and over. Jack reviewed the footage frame by frame. Her lips were easy to read. It's mine. It's mine. It's mine. Then she vanished into the trees. Jack sat back in his chair, chilled to the bone. This wasn't about money. Not even land. This was an obsession, and it had teeth. Jack was still reeling from the footage, Clarissa whispering like a woman possessed, when the first envelope landed in his mailbox. It wasn't from her, at least not directly. It was stamped with an official-looking seal, Willow Pines Homeowners Association. He nearly threw it out. The ranch wasn't part of any development. It was old, isolated, protected by a legal buffer he'd confirmed years ago. The subdivision didn't even touch his fence line, so what could they possibly want? Curiosity and a gut feeling made him open it. Inside were 3 violations: unapproved outbuildings, non-regulation fencing, failure to maintain landscape to HOA code. Jack stared at the page in disbelief. The barn was a historical structure, built by hand before cars were even a thing. The fence had been there for generations. As for the landscape, it was a ranch, not a damned golf course. He flipped the letter over. Fine total, $2,700 due in 14 days. He called the number, listed, expecting some mistake. Instead, a chipper voice answered, Willow Pines HOA, this is Kara. How can I assist you? Yeah, I think I got something meant for someone else. I'm not part of your HOA. A pause. Typing. What's your address? Jack gave it. Another pause. Then, oh, you're technically inside our new boundary expansion. As of last month, we updated our map. You were sent the memo. I wasn't. Well, it would have been certified mail. No memo. Jack snapped. No consent either. I never signed up for your HOA. She didn't flinch. It's a recorded plat now. Automatic inclusion. You can appeal it at the monthly board meeting. He could hear her smirk through the phone, and then it clicked. Clarissa. She wasn't just a neighbor. She was the HOA president. Jack stormed into the county registrar's office the next morning. He requested every map, plat, and zoning document filed in the last 60 days. And there it was, filed and stamped, a new HOA boundary that barely extended north, just enough to wrap around Hollow Creek Ranch like a noose. No vote, no hearing, just a quiet paperwork maneuver that pulled him into their world. She's trying to bury me in rules, Jack muttered, flipping through documents. If she can't take the land through the courts, she'll drown it in fines. He was right. Over the next week, more letters arrived. One threatened action over noise disturbances, his livestock. Another accused him of operating an unpermitted business, his cattle sales. One even demanded he paint the barn white to match the neighborhood aesthetic. Jack was livid, but also strategic. He made copies of everything, documented every threat, stored footage of Clarissa's nighttime visits on a private cloud. She was escalating, so he would too. A friend at the county clerk's office slipped him a quiet tip. You might want to look into the HOA's incorporation records. Something smells off. Real off. Jack dove in that night. Clarissa hadn't just expanded the HOA boundaries. She'd filed the paperwork 3 months ago using a fake vote from residents that didn't exist. One of the signatures, Thomas Hensley, deceased for 92 years. Jack sat back in his chair, blood cold. She wasn't just lying. She was resurrecting ghosts to do it. And the worst part, it was working. The old maps were buried deeper than Jack expected. Most folks had forgotten the town, even had a historical archives room in the library basement. It smelled like dust and moldy paper, and it hadn't been properly lit since the 90s. But that's where he found Grace Delaney, a retired schoolteacher turned amateur historian, sorting yellowed blueprints with gloved fingers and an eagle eye. You're looking for a pre-1900 land survey? She asked, raising an eyebrow. That's going to take some digging. What's the name? Hollow Creek Ranch, Jack said. And a man named Thomas Hensley. She went still. I know the name, she said softly. The Hensleys were one of the founding families. But there was a scandal. Something that got buried. She paused. Wait here. She disappeared into a back room. Jack could hear boxes shifting, papers rustling. When she returned 20 minutes later, she was carrying a tightly rolled scroll, bound with brittle twine. Don't ask me why, but this was stuffed behind the insulation in the wall. Original land survey, dated 1893. She unrolled it carefully on the table. Jack's eyes widened. The ranch boundaries were completely different from the ones on record today. The plot marked Hollow Creek was half its current size, and the entire northern half, including the barn, was labeled T. Hensley. Claim pending! Claim pending! Jack said aloud. Grace nodded. Looks like the land was under dispute when this was drawn. That would have been about a year before your great-grandfather built anything. But our deed says the land was clear and legal in 1895. She pointed to the bottom corner of the old map. Faded, but legible, TH. Initialed 1893, Jack froze. The same initials on the fake HOA vote sheet. Clarissa hadn't invented them. She'd found them. And worse, she might be right. He looked up at Grace. If the original survey still exists, and this document was never officially voided, then she has grounds, Grace said grimly. But that's not the worst part. She handed him another paper, a second map, dated 1896. It matched the modern boundaries, showing Hollow Creek Ranch exactly as Jack knew it today. But look at the signature, she said. The name at the bottom was Samuel Whitmore. The signature, shaky, almost childlike, and next to it, the signature of a notary public. Jack's stomach turned. "That's not my great-grandfather's handwriting," he said. "I've seen his journals. That's not even close." Grace tapped the notary line. "And this notary, he wasn't certified until 1902. That stamp is forged." Jack leaned over the map, his hands trembling. "This map is fake. Looks that way." Clarissa had dug into the past and found the thread no one wanted pulled. Samuel might have falsified the final map, and if Clarissa could prove it in court, Jack's deed might be worthless. He drove home with the maps in his passenger seat, heart hammering. The ranch felt different now, haunted, not just by Clarissa, but by the long shadow of his own family's lies. He parked and walked straight to the barn, not to work, not to check on livestock, to stare at the walls, the boards his great-grandfather nailed in 1895, the ones that might have covered someone else's land. He stepped closer, ran a hand across the weathered wood, and whispered to himself, "What did you do, Samuel?" That night, Clarissa returned, but this time she didn't stop at the barn. She came to the porch, and she left something nailed to his door. A single sheet of paper, summons court date set, property seizure pending. She wasn't bluffing. She was coming for it all. Jack didn't sleep that night. The court summons hung from the fridge like a death notice. The weight of the past, of whatever his great-grandfather might have done, pressed on his shoulders, like the whole ranch was sitting there with it. Clarissa wasn't just threatening him anymore. She had taken it to court. By morning, Jack had a plan. He wasn't going to roll over, not for Clarissa, not for the HOA, and not for the shadows of men long dead. He spent the next day gathering everything: Samuel's original journal, the forged 1896 map, the original 1893 survey Grace had unearthed, the video footage of Clarissa trespassing, and most damning of all, the HOA expansion vote listing Thomas Hensley's name, 92 years after his death. If he was going down, he wasn't going alone, but that night, they came for him. It started with a knock. Not on the door, on the windows. He leapt out of bed, shotgun in hand. Flashlight beam sweeping across the darkness. Nothing. Then came another knock, this time from the back of the house. Jack stormed through the hallway, heart hammering. He threw open the kitchen door. Nothing. But in the distance, near the barn, he saw the flicker of a flashlight. Then it vanished. He ran outside barefoot, shotgun raised. "Who's out there?" No answer. Just whined in the trees. And then he saw them. Orange flags, small plastic markers driven into the dirt every few feet. They hadn't been there yesterday. He followed them around the side of the house. And that's when he saw the sign staked into the lawn. Survey in progress. Property line redetermination by order of HOA. There was no crew, no lights, just a mocking sign, left in silence. She was trying to redraw the lines before the hearing, trying to physically push him off the land by reinterpreting where it began and ended. The next morning, Jack marched straight into the HOA office. Cara, the chipper receptionist, paled when she saw him. "I need to speak to your president. Now," Cara stammered. "Ms. Hensley isn't taking walk-ins. She sent people to my home, staked flags on my land. You tell her if she wants a war. She picked the wrong rancher." Cara swallowed hard. "She's not in today." Jack narrowed his eyes. "Then who left the survey flags?" we have contractors. Third party. Jack leaned over the counter. Their contract's illegal. You just trespassed on private property and falsely claimed jurisdiction. I've got footage. I've got documents. And I'm filing a restraining order. He didn't wait for a reply. He stormed out. That night, the cameras caught something different. Not Clarissa, but two men, in dark hoodies, walking along the eastern fence line. They weren't looking around. They were planting something. Jack paused the footage. One of them held a bundle wrapped in cloth, heavy, suspicious. The next frame, he tucked it into the crawl space beneath the barn. By morning, Jack was there with a crowbar and gloves. He pulled back the boards, shined a light. There it was, wrapped in aged burlap. A rusted revolver and a tin lockbox. Inside the box, a letter. Written in Samuel Whitmore's unmistakable scrawl. If you're reading this, then it's finally come back around. I did what I had to, but I never meant for it to carry this far. Jack dropped the box, because the letter continued. He didn't disappear. I buried him. Jack stared at the letter, heart pounding so hard, it nearly drowned out the wind, howling through the cracks in the barn. He didn't disappear. I buried him. The scrawled ink danced in front of Jack's eyes. The words still burning into his brain. Samuel Whitmore, his great-grandfather, was confessing, not just to a land dispute, to something darker, final, permanent murder. Jack's hands trembled as he read on. He came with papers, claimed the land, but he wouldn't listen, wouldn't leave. We fought. I didn't mean to kill him, but it happened. The others helped me bury him under the northeast corner. They never spoke of it again. But it was his land, and I took it. If anyone ever finds this, I'm sorry, but it's too late to undo. Jack fell back, breath knocked from his chest. Thomas Hensley had been buried here, all this time, under Jack's barn. Suddenly everything made sense. Clarissa's obsession, her whispers, her certainty. She knew. Jack spent the next hour digging under the northeast corner, his shovel striking hard-packed dirt, then something softer. A hollow thunk. He dropped to his knees and pulled back the soil with his hands. There it was, the edge of a coffin, or what was left of one, wood decayed and soaked in earth, but unmistakable. He didn't open it. He didn't have to. Instead, he called Sheriff Monroe. The old man showed up within the hour, squinting against the rising sun, his badge dull and tired. What in the hell did you find, Jack? I found what Clarissa's been looking for. They didn't talk much, as Monroe called in a forensic team. Yellow tape went up. News spread fast. Too fast. By afternoon, the ranch was crawling with reporters, drones buzzing overhead like vultures. And Clarissa? She was there too, not hiding anymore, not lurking in shadows. She stood on the edge of the property, arms crossed, watching as the body was exhumed. Her expression wasn't triumphant. It was cold, steady, like she'd always known it would come to this. That night, Jack sat alone on the porch, watching the last of the police lights fade over the horizon. Clarissa approached without a word. You were right, he said before she could speak. Your great-grandfather. He didn't leave. He was buried here. By mine. She said nothing for a long moment. Then, I never wanted the ranch. Her voice was quiet. I just wanted the truth. My family. They called him crazy for chasing this. But he was right. We were right. Jack looked at her. So now what? She pulled a folded paper from her coat. This is a formal cease and desist. I'm dropping the HOA claim, the court case, everything. I just needed to prove what happened. Jack didn't trust her. Not yet. Why stop now? Clarissa looked up at the stars. Because justice doesn't always mean taking back what's lost. Sometimes it just means dragging it into the light. She turned and walked away, disappearing into the night without another word. Jack stayed on the porch until dawn. He didn't feel vindicated. He felt unmoored. The land he'd spent his life defending wasn't what he thought it was. The legacy he carried wasn't just stolen. It was soaked in a buried lie. But now, that truth was out, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The sun rose over Hollow Creek Ranch, casting long shadows across the freshly disturbed earth. Jack stood near the barn, the cold morning breeze tugging at his jacket, but he barely noticed. His mind was heavy. The truth was out, but it didn't feel like victory. The county had officially recognized the original 1893 survey as valid. Samuel Whitmore's forged 1896 map was declared fraudulent. His land claim nullified posthumously. The sheriff's office had closed the investigation, confirming the remains belonged to Thomas Hensley. The ranch, by law, now belonged to Clarissa's family. Jack had expected anger, bitterness, perhaps even a fight, but Clarissa had done something unexpected. She showed up at his door that afternoon, carrying a folder thick with legal documents, deeds, contracts, settlement offers. "I want to make this right," she said, her voice steady but softened. "The land belongs to my family. Now, yes, but I'm not here to take it away from you." Jack raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "What do you mean?" She smiled faintly. "I'm proposing a partnership, a joint stewardship of the ranch. We preserve its history, honor both families. We turn this place into something bigger than old grudges." Jack felt a flicker of something he hadn't expected. Hope. They spent hours going through the papers, drafting a plan that would blend their legacies. The barn would become a heritage site, open to the public on weekends. The ranch itself would continue its agricultural operations, managed jointly. Both families' stories would be shared, side by side. Clarissa even suggested they petition the county for a historic landmark status to protect the land from future disputes. Jack saw the wisdom in it, a way to heal wounds decades old, to ensure the past's shadows didn't darken the future. But then, as they signed the final document, Jack noticed something tucked in the folder, an old folded letter he hadn't seen before. He unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was different, unfamiliar. It read, "If you're reading this, then you've uncovered the worst of my secrets. But know this, not all debts are paid in dirt and bones." Jack looked up sharply. Clarissa's face had gone pale. "That letter wasn't in my family's records," she admitted quietly. "It's new." Jack's heart raced. "What else are we missing?" Clarissa shook her head. "I don't know, but if your great-grandfather left more behind, we'll find it, together." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the ranch in amber light, Jack and Clarissa stood side by the barn. The past was no longer a war zone, but a foundation, cracked, but solid enough to build on. And for the first time in decades, Hollow Creek Ranch felt like home.